Greetings, Zimbabwe. Welcome to the program Power Talk. My name is Sean Moyo, your host for the program. Today on the program with a special guest, we host a senior member of the ruling ZANU PF. He is the Secretary for War Veterans and War Veterans Affairs in the ZANU PF Politburo, Comrade Douglas Mahiya. Comrade Mahiya, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. I must first of all correct you to say Douglas Mahiya. You say Douglas K Mahiya, because if you say Douglas Mahiya, it's another person.
Right, Comrade Douglas K Mahiya, as you have it there, Zimbabwe. Right, getting straight into it, we just want to speak about the issue of the war veterans and their welfare and the programs that you have rolled out, and also that you've always been working on since you took up this role. And just want to understand, so it's not a particularly political or ZANU PF wide, but specifically focusing on the issue of war veterans, just so we disabuse any other notion out there. Right, perfect. First of all, perhaps you may go into a little history. For you to become a Comrade Douglas K Mahiya, you have to go through a war. You have to be a war veteran. That means you went to war. Can you give us just a brief history of your role in the Liberation War? How old were you, and what pushed you into actually going into war?
In as much as people want to know about that, it must be understood that I belong to a generation which I have always labeled as in a very unfortunate generation. Right. We are the generation that was taken by a wave that required the people of Zimbabwe to come up and conscript and come up with an army to fight for the liberation of this country. So in 1975, I'm one of them. I was scooped and honestly became one of them. I stayed in Mozambique up to until my opportunity to get a military training came. I went to get trained in Tanzania at a camp known as Nachingwea, the famous Nachingwea. Right. I say the famous because it is the military camp that trained Frelimo soldiers that overthrew the Portuguese government.
Right.
So shortly after that, I came back and got deployed in Cde sector. It's known as MNZ province, Cde sector. And there I got engaged with the enemy on a daily basis. So my responsibility was to politicize the masses, to conscientize them, to make them understand why the war. We successfully did that. I worked in, I'm one of the guys who worked in Tanda, Chikore, Chidambuya, in Nyanga, Murewa, and I think part of Kurmonzi at the end.
Right.
So I got engaged. I was shot at. I have all the experience and every other story that surrounds those activities.
Right.
So up until the independence, and after independence, like any other, I joined the civil service until I got retrenched and forced to become a farmer because that was the only way to survive on.
Right. Yeah. Right, perfect. And your name was?
Moto WeChimurenga.
Moto WeChimurenga.
Moto WeChimurenga.
That's your liberation war name?
Yeah, Moto WeChimurenga.
Right. And if I may ask, how old were you when you actually went to war?
I was, I think I was 21.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, perfect. Comrade Mahiya, we have seen the recent activities that you are spearheading for the war veterans. You've been going to various provinces of the country, trying to uplift and empower the war veterans. Can you give us a brief narrative of what brought this into effect?
We are mandated by the constitution of the party ZANU PF to mobilize the war veterans and be, among other things, and be able to come up with the programs that should activate the spirit of flexibility that we fought as a principle of the revolution into them, so that they're able to add up everything else and be able to survive.
Right.
So that's what the Constitution tells us. We must mobilize them so that we have income generating projects. Let me give you an example of the people whom we replaced, who colonized this country. When they arrived, they were given opportunities they were given lands, they were given loans, very concessional. That's how they became the business person that you see in Harare today.
Right.
And so my duty or my assignment requires me to turn the political force that brought about independence to become an economic force to fight for the economic liberation of this country.
Right.
And this is what we are doing. And this only came about out of the wisdom of the President President Mnangagwa, because for the 40 years we have been independent. The past regime did not think about us, and yet we are the people who sacrificed their lives to bring about the much needed political environment for everybody.
Right.
So the president then decided to have a wing known as the War Veterans League.
Right.
It is composed of ZANLA, ZIPRA, ex-political prisoners and detainees, and ex-political prisoners and cadres. Cadres are those war veterans who went out there but did not get an opportunity to get trained. Right. And deployed militarily. Right. So those are the people who, that's my constituents. Right. I take care of that and ensure that I fulfilled the assignment as given by the constitution of the party and the assignment by the Central Committee. Right. From time to time.
Right. And why I brought up that question, Comrade Mahiya, was because I want you to clear there's a narrative that perhaps this initiative coincided with some ructions within the ruling party, where certain members of your party, we can speak of Comrade Geza, as it were, he spoke what he spoke, and then during that moment, that is when you were going around the country to beef up the warfare of the war veterans. So maybe you may want to clarify the nation as to, was it a knee-jerk reaction to what Comrade Geza said and his group, or it was always within the purview, or it was within the plans?
It was in my purview. In fact, it becomes deliberate for anyone to want to relate Geza's statements and the president's initiative to fulfill his vision to war veterans, because it is out of his wisdom that the War Veterans League to become an organ of the party. Right. What he intended to do is exactly that, started by the program which is called the War Veterans Family, the War Veterans Fund. Right. It is meant to assist the war veterans to start small in their small projects, and the president in his promise says, then we will have tested the capabilities of individuals and be able to identify those who can, so that we are able to continue funding those projects from humble beginnings to become much bigger. He has the vision, we will follow the vision.
Right. So it's merely a coincidence. There was no relation to, it's not a reaction to any form of activity by fellow war veterans.
No. It has no relationship. It is, let me say, it happened almost at the same time. Right. Because it is a thing that the War Veterans League National Executive has also been requesting the party to respond to, because it has been our main problem to try and improve the welfare of the war veteran.
Right. And another thing to clarify, Comrade Mahiya, is there are times where war veterans generally are a very powerful force within the country by virtue of what you did for the country, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And obviously, if you are very powerful in ZANU PF, naturally the country are very, very powerful. That's what war veterans are. So some people may have the notion that war veterans seem to be entitled. Whenever you have a difficulty, your voice is very, very strong. So some may feel like the war veterans, in 1997, you got a compensation from government, and you've had several incentives. So what do you say about the notion that war veterans tend to want a lot, or to, I would say, should I say, demand a lot from the nation based on your sacrifice?
It's somebody's understanding as an individual. But people also do not want to talk about kakuregerwa nokungoitwa ignore that has happened to war veterans over the period from independence to now.
Right.
A person of my age, or people of my age, managed to use their time to work for their lives. I did not. Some of them are business owners today, but I'm just a poor war veteran without anything.
Right.
You remember that opportunities to be a businessman arises within your productive period of life.
Right.
This has happened to everyone else,
right.
And it is not happened to the war veteran.
Right.
The war veteran lost his job. He lost his opportunity to go to school, and he even lost his family, all the wealthy, a 40-year deficit when somebody else was working for himself.
Right.
Using the, we did not.
Right.
So we are trying to come up at least with something which, when I die, will be inherited by my children.
Right.
So we are not asking for much. However, it must be understood that the nation has become productive to this level to be able for even the poorest household have a television. It's out of the initiative that the war veterans has done. And that is value. And that value, we need to, it has to continue in all families, including mine. But probably war veterans cannot afford it because they are living on a paltry, on $135 a month. And this is too little. And that 135 is what should take someone to school, is what should look after his health and everything else. Right. So it's a deficit. You want to know that other countries that fought similar wars do not handle war veterans the way they are handled here in Zimbabwe. You can Google and find out how the American war veterans are looked after. Yes. So really for Zimbabwe is to think that we are asking for too much. We are not.
Right.
Because we are the source of every bit of wealth that is there, and yet we have nothing. Right. We are poor liberators who are dying tichivigwa neurombo.
Right. Right. And last question on that particular topic. There are people who would have fallen out of favor with you, for example, not you as an individual, but as in the movement or the party, right? People get expelled or people get suspended. Do they lose their comradeship when that happens? Like, can you meet them on the street and still call them comrade, or the comrade strictly when you are within the umbrella of ZANU PF?
The value of being a war veteran is embraced in one's membership to the party.
Right.
You can continue being called a war veteran, but ineffectively. You have disengaged yourself from the duty of a revolutionary. A war veteran purportedly is a revolutionary.
Right.
And his contribution, actions, and the political utterances and everything else promotes liberation, political and economic.
Right.
But when you are expelled, you no longer have that platform. It belongs to the party. Because, however, it is ZANU PF that prosecuted the war, and not Mahiya, and not Moto WeChimurenga, but it is the party. So collectively, we are more effective and understood, identifiable, and can be assisted wherever possible. But as an individual, you may have lost that platform. Even during the liberation struggle, there were people who could fall out of the actual system, and we used to call them scouts, but he ceases to become a war veteran, a comrade. A comrade is a person who gave his own life like Jesus for the liberation of the nation. But if you go offline disregarding the principles of the revolution, that means you are no longer one of them.
Right. And you went to war at a very young age, as well as a lot of our war veterans. My father went to war as well. I think he was 14 when he went to war. He's now late. So my question is, if your comrades who passed away in the trenches when you were fighting, if they would have had capacity, we don't know if people who are late can really see, but if they had capacity to look and see what's currently happening in the country, do you think they would be very pleased that what we fought for is really what's taking place? Like 44 years later, I think we're okay. Every country has challenges, yeah, it's got troubles, but do you think they would be happy and proud that fine, this is what we fought for?
The revolutionary principle says every other war veteran understands that war, one, is not a dinner party. Two, a revolution never ends,
right?
Because it has got stages.
Right.
We had the political one. We are now the economic one, and the economic one seems to be much more difficult than the first phase of the revolution. Right. So it continues. No veteran will ever expect to be happy with what is happening, because the achievements and aspirations of the people of Zimbabwe still are not yet met. Not because of any other person, because of the nature of the process, right, of the development, political development. Right. It's its nature.
Right, no, it makes sense. Now let's move into the topic of persuaders. You are the persuader in chief. The president, he has spoken about his desire not to carry on after the finalization of his second term. But there's a group called Persuaders, of which you're a member. I've seen you chanting slogans that you want to persuade the president to prevail upon him to continue to serve the country. What is your desire? Why are you persuading the president when he has clearly said he's not interested? What's the primary motive?
It's like one finds a formula to a problem.
Right.
You need to develop that formula to much greater heights for the benefit of any target group. Mm-hmm. And the people of Zimbabwe, the development that is come by, that has happened from the period when the president took over. Had it happened 40 years ago, we would be somewhere in terms of Zimbabwean economic struggle. Right. We would be much better than what we are. Right. And we think that it is important that we persuade him, right, to continue for a little while for our benefit. Right. We had Mugabe at his time, and the war veterans will not forget that period, because it was the period that they were not anything in the party. And when the new dispensation came, we became a wing. We became contributors to the policy, to the political dispensation of the country. We make a contribution. So that development alone makes us feel that we would be much better if you would continue directing the party to that other level of 2030. And I think the beneficiary anaita benefit is the war veteran anga akaraswa. Saka we think he would need, that's the first point, we would need him to continue right up to 2030. Secondly, we have a revolutionary principle that says that minorities is subordinate to majority.
Right.
We are a political party.
Right.
And in December, the party goes to a conference where the party looks at its activities and see the achievements and failures and the reasons why, and chart a way forward. And this was done. The party went to that conference. It's an annual conference. It's a constitutional conference, and at the conference, provinces then forwarded their resolutions, and the resolutions of each and every province, the number one province that that was given by provinces is to request the president to proceed to 2030.
Right.
ZANU PF has got 3 wings, which is the Women's League, the Youth League, and the War Veteran.
Right.
So all of them, the 3 wings, their resolution number 1 was to request the president to proceed to 2030. So hence we become persuaders, although the president says, allow me to rest. But he is also aware of the fact that when the majority says we are going to take this direction, everyone else is expected to comply, including the president. Because he also says in his own words, the voice of the people are the voice of God, is the voice of God. So when God speaks, everyone else, every other creation yake inoterera. And this is exactly what we are doing as we persuade him. I'm not persuading him from my personal ambitions or desires, but in compliance with the principle of the revolution that says minority is subordinate to majority. Because we, at the conference, everyone else, the chairman of the party, Man Chinguri, asked if there was anyone else who had a contrary view to what had been proffered by the majority, by the totality of the conference. And there was none. So it becomes my duty constitutionally to protect the interests of the party and its leadership. It is enshrined in the constitution, in the party constitution. So as war veterans and as a secretary of the war veterans, then I am duty bound to ensure that what the people said has happened, has been taken on board, is appreciated. It is my duty to educate the ordinary person who was not at the conference to understand that the party agreed its totality. Everyone else angariko takatenderana, this is what we want to do.
So it was discussed as a motion at the conference.
No, you might not be aware of the systems, but
right.
When I say resolutions, people come up with the resolutions not at the conference. Resolutions are done before people come to the conference. So in other words, right. They are the people at home,
right,
who contributed to the resolution. Those who come, who become candidates, who come to the conference are mere presenters of what Zawatunga Kubakumusha. Saka then it is presented. So it is the totality of the people. And no one has the right to go against that. If you go against that, we end against the Lushinji Wewan and against the principle of the revolution. Wapandu.
Right. So if it's to go to a referendum, do you see it, passing? Do you see it winning? Since you're saying the people drove this initiative, do you see it passing with flying colors?
There is no reason why it should not, if the people said it. If it doesn't happen, then you and me must ask them, why is it like, why have you mafungire izvozvo but ndozvavanenge vafunga vanhu.
Right. And another thing would be, I'm not sure if it's okay to discuss this, but it is natural. It's the age of the president, right? When this term comes to an end, he will probably be around 85, 86. Probably will still be strong. But then extending his term means he will go into the 90s. Do you still think
it is this generation that thinks that if somebody is advanced in age, he performs less, and yet the Bible tells you that the patriarchs could live up to 160 years, but they could still remain people of God and would be leading the nation. And I don't see why he can't be. If God allowed him to be leader and is assigning him that duty, he should give him the strength.
Right. And
no one should be worried about that. We don't need to think about that because it's nature.
Right. No one can really control that.
Yeah, no one controls that.
Right. And coming last one on that particular topic of the persuaders, in terms of policy consistency, that the country would need to look like it is consistency in terms of its posture, as well as the policies that it sets apart. So when the president says inini nguva yangu yakuda kukwana, in 4 or 5 years time my time will be enough, but then Zimbabweans or war veterans or any other interested party persuades him to change his mind, do you think does that not give policy inconsistency that the presidency has maintained a stance and
it only become consistent according to a certain standard, according to a certain to certain societies who speak about consistency.
Right.
But my principles of revolution kana tikatakabva kuhondo, we hapana chiri kuitika muno muchatisina kudiscussa even kuvapo kweconstitution, and isusu takataura openly kuti we are going to contribute to a constitution. Obviously hakuna nyika isingazove neconstitution. So but the constitution yatinisa, if ikange yaakuzotadza kuwirirana nemamiriro anenge akaita zvinhu, we must amend that constitution or tear it up and write another one.
Right.
That is why we fought to have the political power.
Right.
So that power must be utilized to the maximum. That is why takatonga over this period, and all other contesting parties failed because they failed to get the mandate of the people. In actual fact, spiritually, ZANU PF is not ruling from a carnal agreement. It is a divine agreement. It is not an agreement, it's a covenant because it involves the blood.
So essentially you are saying it's partly a spiritual entity. It's not just...
I want to believe that, yes.
Right.
Because we have been led by the Spirit to be able to conquer a well-organized and equipped army. Yes, Niputi Zatayati is very inferior. So it is spiritual. God allowed us to fool.
And talking about ZANU PF and going forward, how many more years do you see ZANU PF ruling this country? Do you see it ruling forever, or you see it for the next 20, 30, 5 years?
ZANU PF is the people of Zimbabwe. It will only fail to rule if the enemy uses other methods. But essentially, for as long as the people of Zimbabwe exist as Zimbabweans, it should be ZANU PF, because the definition here is ZANU PF is that of people of Zimbabwe after the oppression, the way they gathered and called their party ZANU PF.
Right.
So ZANU PF, as long as there are people, we identify ourselves as Zimbabweans, the ZANU PF should always rule, and it will.
Right. And lastly, in terms of the unanimity of the War Veterans League and the war veterans in general, in pursuing all your objectives, including persuading the president to stay on in power, how united are the war veterans in that regard? In that obviously we have seen other war veterans come out and speak out against that. With the Andres Matiwela faction of the war veterans, and of course the famous one, Comrade Geza, and
Geza does not lead any association at all. Right. He is himself.
Well, he's a war veteran, but he's not leading association.
No, he's not leading anybody.
Right. So I'm trying to gauge how much support.
You don't have to expect that from the fraternity.
Right.
You don't have to expect that from the war veterans, because those who are not even war veterans are also not as united as your question would demand. Right. So it's natural. Right. You would get somebody else whose thinking may not allow you to say we are united. Moto WeChimurenga, my commanders, people who understood more about the interaction between the people and the enemy, who could strategize. And there are people who were there, who are war veterans, but may not be able to be reading the radar well. And so they need to be led. That's why there is leadership. And here I don't represent myself. That's why I am here. I am a leader of the war veterans until otherwise.
Right. In speaking, it's an interesting point. I had almost closed, but this one just came up. You talk about leading the radar and reading the environment. I remember at the time of the new dispensation, you were at the forefront of fighting for the current president to come into power, right? And there were factions of war veterans. There was the main wing, which was led by Mnangagwa and you as spokesperson, and Vamatemadanda is SG, right? You were firmly in the corner of the president. Then there was other factions also who were in the corner of the other side of the coin. You seem to have read.
There wasn't.
It wasn't a faction.
It wasn't a faction. If you can name it.
If I say G40,
no, they're not war veterans. War veterans, G40 were not war veterans. They were just an age group ambitious. That's all.
So
we as war veterans, we didn't need to relate to them as any political force competent enough to declare us unable to proceed executing the principles of the revolution. No.
Right. No, that makes sense. And lastly, Comrade Mahiya, your message to, number one, your constituency, the war veterans, and also to Zimbabweans in general.
Zimbabweans in general must understand the fact that it is ZANU PF that championed the fight against colonialism, imperialism, oppression in all forms, and it still remains competent to continue doing that, despite areas where it finds it difficult, because it is a party composed of natural people. Because the enemy is also organizing against us, you need to have the right strategy in place. All that must not matter, because it is a struggle defined, talks of two fighting forces, and as we proceed since the inception of ZANU PF and the struggle, it is a war between two, I call that contrast of knowledge systems, the development of capitalism and the development of African economy and policies. Those are the two. They continue to fight, and the ZANU PF is champion, because it has defeated openly the enemy, and the enemy was forced to come to a negotiating table up to the stage where we are. But it is still fighting, because I consider the Lancaster House Agreement not as an agreement. It is a British or military strategy to allow them to organize, because they had been defeated. So they organized, and then were able to think that it is best, maybe it is best, to create a neo-colonial political organ to dethrone ZANU PF. So the struggle continues.
Right. In terms of creating a neo-colonial entity to fight ZANU PF, is it a fact that every single political party that comes up in opposition and to ZANU PF and is got weight, it becomes automatically a creation of the neo-colonial forces?
We have not seen one which is not singing the master's song. As long as their objectives do not represent the interests of the people by using the principle of majority, minority being subordinate to majority, it becomes colonialist, because colonialists don't care, they believe in Congress.
But we can never really expect ZANU PF to sort of rubber stamp in opposition and say this one is legitimate.
No, we cannot be stopped from describing that way, because they describe us the way they want. Right. And you can't stop us from describing them the way we analyze them, the way we see them as.
Right.
It won't be fair.
Right. Thank you so much, Zimbabwe, for watching. That was Comrade Douglas K Mahiya, aka Moto WeChimurenga, the leader or the secretary for war veterans in the ZANU PF Politburo.